2 weeks to the draft. That means it is prime time for our guest tonight, host and analyst for Pro Football Focus, Trevor Sikkema, joining us now. Good to talk to you again, Trevor. And boy, I don't know if you're excited for this thing to finally get here or to be over, or is this is your wheelhouse right now, right?
It's a good mix of both. I appreciate you guys having me on. Always fun to talk ball with you guys. But yeah, it's a good mix of both. Whenever you get into the month of April, you definitely can't wait for it to be over. But at the same time, getting to do stuff like this and talk about the possibilities of what is the upcoming NFL draft, that's the fun part. So I definitely enjoy it along the way, no matter where we are in the process.
Trevor, the intrigue at the top of the draft with really the four big quarterbacks with Stroud and Young and Levis and Richardson, where do you think that these kind of cards are going to fall at the top of the draft?
Yeah, I think Bryce is going to go number one. I felt like it was very interesting that Carolina immediately trades up to number one overall, and then we hear about all the other quarterbacks. Oh, they could be in on Stroud. Oh, they're going to love Anthony Richardson's potential. Oh, maybe some people in the building love Levis. Nobody was talking about Bryce, and I think it's because we were bored. And I really do think that when it's all said and done, Bryce Young is going to be the number one quarterback and the number one pick in this draft. I don't think that C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson are going to be too far behind. I think those guys are destined for the top 5 as well. As for Richardson, or as for Levis, I think his range is anywhere from number 7 with the Las Vegas Raiders all the way through the top 20. Who knows eventually where he is going to go. But I do think all 4 of these guys are going to come off the board somewhere within the top 20. We'll just have to see how in on this quarterback class the rest of the league really is.
I think it's always interesting in that sometimes a lot of draft people want to try to predict the pick, so they want to kind of figure out exactly what Carolina is doing. But, Trevor, if you were picking number 1 overall, which quarterback would you pick?
I would still be taking Bryce, and I've been standing on this table the whole time. I really would. This guy has been too good over the last 2 years for me to not pick him. You look at the other quarterbacks, and they've all got their pros and cons, and of course Bryce does as well. But his cons are all right. He's not as big as you want for the position, and the biggest con with Bryce Young in his scouting report is, well, is he going to get hurt? I'm not going to let myself pass on the best player in college football over the last couple of years on an if. I mean, anybody can get hurt in this league. It is the biggest, fastest athletes that we have in the world that come together in the NFL, and anybody can get hurt any given play, any given Sunday. So I understand that it is a concern with his durability and where his weight is, where his height is. But, man, the height didn't seem to be an issue because when you look at smaller quarterbacks, you say, all right, they can't see over the line of scrimmage. They can't attack the middle of the field consistently. Bryce Young absolutely did that. So the only thing on his scouting report that I think is that negative is that big, is he going to get hurt? That's not enough for me to pass on him as the top choice in this class. So even if it was a what I would do situation, I'd be taking Bryce Young.
Trevor Sikkema with us, Pro Football Focus. Give him a follow at Tampa Bay Trey, Tre, on Twitter. Well, fortunately, Trevor, the Jaguars have a Trevor in the backfield at quarterback. They don't have to worry about the top of the draft this year. 2 years in a row, the number 1 overall pick. This year, a much different feel at 24th overall. So, how deep does the blue chip first-round talent actually go? Some years it's deeper than others. Where does it stand this year, in your opinion?
Man, in terms of blue chip prospects, which are those guys at the very top who – look, the NFL draft is never any sort of guarantee, but it's the guys who you think would be NFL draft or bust proof. Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, and Bijan Robinson have the tape that it feels like it tells you they are impactful enough, they are talented enough to earn that blue chip label. After that, I think there's a decent amount of first-round grades, but still, they all come with their pros and cons. This doesn't seem to be the deepest class in the NFL when it comes to those first-round grades. I wonder if teams across the league are going to have an average of somewhere around 20, whereas in other years you can get a lot closer to that 30, 35 number when it's really rich classes. And so I would say that the first round grades are probably going to be a little bit less this year, but that doesn't mean there's still not going to be some damn good defensive players, specifically on defense, I should say, that you can get in the back half of the first round, early part of the second round, because that's what it feels like the sweet spot is for a lot of these guys.
Well, it may not be a deep class for potential first-round grades, but, Trevor, the one position that seems to be incredibly deep is the cornerback position, which that's a position of need for the Jaguars. Who might be available for the Jaguars at their pick?
Yeah, so it's a great year to need a corner. I think of all shapes and sizes. It's a great year to need outside corners. It's a great year to need nickel corners because you got a wide variety of guys to choose from. I mean, I think the guys at the top, Jags probably won't have their chance to get guys like Devon Witherspoon, guys like Christian Gonzalez. I would say Joey Porter Jr. and even Devontae Banks are probably going to be off the board by the time that they pick. But if you want to take a chance on a guy like Emmanuel Forbes in the first round, he's an outside corner that could be very intriguing. But when it comes to that slot options, and that feels like that's what Jacksonville might need immediately on this roster, man, there's a lot of different guys to choose from. Brian Branch feels like the easy home run pick for the Jags if they can get him. About as reliable as they come. Comes from that Nick Saban defense at Alabama. Had so much responsibility in the slot. Played it very smart. I think the combine's freaking people out a little bit because he didn't test as well as we thought he was going to. Trust the tape on Brian Branch. He's going to be incredible in the NFL. I fully believe that. You've also got guys like Clark Phillips, a corner who's a little bit smaller, feisty, but you love him as a potential slot guy. Another safety in Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M, who's a bigger-bodied guy, can line up against those tight ends and big-bodied wide receivers. Teams love to put as the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 to the inside of the formation. There's just a lot of different guys to choose from at the slot. So even if Jags fans out there might really want a corner, and they start seeing guys run on corners early in the draft, it's okay. You can still get one at the back end of the first round that's really going to help out your secondary.
How concerned are you with Emmanuel Forbes of Mississippi State and his slight frame, let's say? What is he, $170?
Yeah, I mean, he's $170, I feel like, on a good day at this point. There's no doubt about it that he's got to get bigger. I mean, he's a great natural athlete. He's got a baseball background. It's just he's played multiple sports, and nobody's really had better ball production than him over the last couple of years. Now, of course, we know that interceptions aren't always just on the cornerback. Sometimes it's right place, right time. And that did happen plenty in Emmanuel Forbes' tape. But he's feisty. He never backs down. And sure, in run defense, you say, hey, I wish he had a little bit more strength. But it's not like a lack of willingness for him when it comes to making those plays on the ball, or at least being around the ball. You got to get him up into the at least mid-70s. Try to get up in the 180 range, because that's really what it feels like he's going to need to survive. You can't really play this guy on the outside against press coverage because these NFL receivers, they're just too big and too fast. I'm afraid he's just going to get bullied at the line of scrimmage and at the catch point, and that's going to neutralize a lot of good things that he brings to the table. He's a really athletic dude. His recovery speed is some of the best in this class, and he's got the longer arms to really be able to affect those catch points and get forced incompletions. So there's good things about Forbes, but to your point, there's no doubt about it. The weight is an issue, and I do think we got to get that up a little bit if he's going to be able to achieve what he wants to at the NFL level.
And there's a lot of philosophies when it comes to kind of putting your plan together as far as drafting. And one of the plans that most teams may take, because the corner class is deep, they may choose to wait and try to get one later on. Offensive line, the big guys are always kind of few and far between. How does the offensive line class look for a Jaguar possibility of them picking one there at 24?
Yeah, I think that this is certainly, if they want an offensive tackle, there is a decent chance that they could get a good one there in the mid-20s, because for a long time we've been talking about these big three with offensive tackle: Peter Skoronski, Paris Johnson Jr., and Broderick Jones. I would expand it to a big five. I really think that you could throw Darnell Wright in there, and you can throw Anton Harrison in there as well. Both of those players talented enough to be early starters in the NFL. They both got experience. They're both battle tested. And I think that creates a big five of offensive tackles that we could all see go in the first round. And maybe there'll be a super early run like we saw a couple of years ago with the Jedrick Wills and Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton class. But there's still a chance. I think one of those guys could be available for the Jags. So you're losing Juwan Taylor. You might want to replace him. I know they got Walker Little, but if you want to get some more offensive tackle talent in there, they could definitely hit that in the first round. I think that's plausible.
If it's down to Darnell Wright of Tennessee and DeJuan Jones of Ohio State, which way would you lean?
Oh, man, I would easily be putting in the card for Darnell Wright. He is one of my favorite players in this class. I've got him as the second-rated offensive tackle in this class, so he's OT2 on my board. I just feel like he's a five-star recruit, so he's got that athletic background, that high pedigree coming into Tennessee. He was so battle-tested this past year against some of the best pass rushers in the SEC: B.J. Ojulari, Will Anderson, and the list could go on and on. He is a big, mean offensive tackle who loves to take the fight to the pass rushers that are coming at him. He is the embodiment of the phrase that you hear all the time, that pass protection isn't passive. He'll, get into his kick slide a little bit, but if you're taking a little while, if you're trying to get too many steps of steam to convert that speed to power, he'll stick his arm out, he'll punch you right in the chest, and he'll make sure that you feel him very early and often. So I just feel like his demeanor, his mentality, his anchor ability, and also how well he moves his feet when he wants to, he feels like the total package at offensive tackle. So I got him at OT2 in this class. You get him in the 20s, that's a steal to me.
Jalen Carter is kind of a big question mark in this draft, Trevor, and where do you see him going? A little question about his background, but I don't think there's any question about his talent.
No, on the field, again, blue chip player. I mean, there's just not many who can disrupt from the 3 technique position that he does. And so when you look at where he's going to go in this draft, I think the over under right now, depending on where you look, it's around 6.5, 7.5. I think that's right, because right before 6.5, you get the Lions sitting at 6, you get the Seahawks sitting at 5, and just after that, you got a handful of teams. Atlanta sitting there at 8, certainly Philadelphia sitting there at 10, Chicago at 9, Tennessee at 11. All of these teams would want a player like Jalen Carter. So I feel like that range is about correct. You'll say the top 12, no matter what, it feels like a lock unless we learn something else about some off-the-field things with Jalen Carter. But as of right now, I would tell you, I still believe he's going to be a top 8 pick. I still feel as though one of the Detroit Lions and the Seattle Seahawks at 5 or 6 are going to be the ones to pull the trigger on.
Boy, can you imagine Detroit fans having Aiden Hutchinson last year and then Jalen Carter this year? I mean, an outside guy, an inside guy. Holy cow, would they be happy?
Dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
And it's not just them either. You got Aleem McNeil on that defensive line. You got James Houston, who's going crazy with the sacks last year as well. Yep. So that makes one hell of a pass rush group. They can add Carter to that, no doubt about it.
They're not on the schedule next year, are they? Lions? I don't think so.
Didn't go so well in Detroit.
No, it didn't last year, for sure. Hey, Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. What do you guys have the next couple of weeks leading into the draft?
Oh, man, we got all sorts of good stuff. Of course, the final mock drafts, the final big boards, our final predictions. And as we learn about what we think is going to happen on draft day, we're letting everybody know over at PFF.com and on our podcast show as well, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast.
Give him a follow at Tampa Bay Trey. If you don't, I don't know why you don't. He's a fantastic follow on Twitter, and you guys do a great job at Pro Football Focus. Thanks for the time, Trevor.
Appreciate it, guys. Anytime.